Pokemon Hard Gold and Soul Silver have been the star child for fans for many years, but have recently been seeing more and more criticism, including but not limited to the poor level curve, the lack of Pokemon variety, unmemorable characters, and no good places to grind Pokemon. But the one I want to focus on is that the evil team just kinda sucks. And now I know that Pokemon isn't really known for having good stories, but Team Rocket in this game are particularly bad. You only ever face off against them twice, and both times they fight using Pokemon with levels far below the gym leaders you've just been fighting. It's clear that this was added just to pad some more hours onto the short Johto campaign, so let's do their job, but better, and do a Hardcore Nuzlocke to prove a point. To summarize the rules of a Hardcore Nuzlocke, you can only catch the first encounter per route. If a Pokemon faints, it's no longer usable. Set mode must be on. No items can be used in battle, but held items are fine. There are level caps based on the next gym leader's highest leveled Pokemon, and you can only catch one Pokemon of an evolutionary line. And some personal rules I add. You can only use the same number of Pokemon as the gym leader. If presented with an option, choose the one that would make the game harder, for example pick the worst starter for that region. And full disclosure, I use rare candies. In my opinion, grinding is just a waste of time and unfun in general. You can always grind on low level routes and never lose any Pokemon, but I'll only allow myself to use them once I've reached the gym. Now the rules for this specific challenge. You can only use stolen Pokemon. These are Pokemon that we catch from other trainers. You can't catch Pokemon from important trainers or areas. For example, we can't catch Pokemon from gyms, rivals, or just general boss battles. We're trying to keep a low profile after all. And that's that, so let's get started. Elm forces us to pick a starter, and I decided to go for Chikorita as I think the rival having a fire type would be harder to deal with. We'll be ditching it anyway as we didn't catch it the honorable way, so I refused to give it a nickname. On the way to Mr. Pokemon's house, we had a glimpse of our soon-to-be starter choices. Elm calls us telling us there's some kids trying to steal our video idea. We fight the boy in question and a level 6 Chikorita faints to a level 5 Cyndaquil, proving that stolen Pokemon are superior. We get interrogated despite not having committed a crime, so shifting attention to Red allows us to walk away cleared of suspicion. Exactly, Lyra. Lyra hands me some Pokeballs, thus starting the Nuzlocke and making her complicit to the soon-to-be crime spree. Well, first we need to get our real starter. We head to Route 30 and we have a choice between Pidgey and Rattata. Of course, we won't be giving up the opportunity to get Joey's world-renowned top percentage Rattata, so welcome to the team, Rattata. And thus starting the Nuzlocke. Further up on Route 31, we steal Caterpie from Wade and call it Iprotac. Then in Sprout Tower, we steal Torpslab the Bellsprout from Nico. And that's all our encounters for the first gym. Really. We have 2 Pokemon weak to flying, and Rattata. I decided to bring Iprotac and Rattata, training up to be level 13 and getting them just enough experience to be shy of reaching level 14. I lead with Iprotac, but switch right into Rattata on Pidgey's Sand Attack. Rattata hits both bites, bringing Pidgey down and leveling up both of my team members to level 14. Next up it's the illegal Pidgeotto, who's the real threat. I switch to Iprotac on Pidgeotto's Tackle, which does about a quarter. I outspeeds and hits a Sleep Powder with Compound Eyes. The first confusion crits, bringing Pidgeotto below half, who immediately wakes up, hitting a gust to put I into crit range. I puts Pidgeotto back to sleep, and 2 more confusions earn us the first badge. Not a difficult battle, but it could have gone a lot worse. Elm's assistant gives us an egg trying to once again set us on the right path, but we've already got a badge, so what did they know? We have quite a few options on Route 32, but I just go for the first trainer I see. I challenge Albert, but he sends out a Rattata. We've already got the top percentage one, so I defeat it and find my real encounter, Taboo's the Zubat. In Union Cave, I stealthily dodge all the trainers until I reach Pokemaniac Larry, who hands over Copples the Slowpoke. And then on Route 33, we steal a valuable rock and call him Dewdog. While heading to Azalea, we come across our real rivals. I won't be stealing any Pokemon from Team Rocket as that would draw attention, and why would I want inferior Pokemon? Team Rocket gets steamrolled by Iprotac and Copples and the confusions. For Bugsy, we bring Dewdog, I, and Taboos. Bugsy leads with the Scyther, and I send out I. Scyther gets off Leer and then gets put to sleep by Sleep Powder. A couple of gusts activate her Citrus Berry. Scyther wakes up and hits I with a quick attack doing over half. Gust puts Scyther in heal range. I switch to Dewdog as Bugsy uses a super potion. Scyther sets up a focus energy, but a single rock throw brings her down. Metapod and Kakuna can't do anything against I and his gusts, and we've got the second badge. We're already on the second badge and we have exactly 0 Johto Pokemon. Funny that, huh? On the way out of Azalea, Red challenges us to a fight. He sends out Ghastly and I switch straight into I on the mean look. It goes down to 1 confusion. Next up is Quilava, so I go back into Dewdog but get hit with the smoke screen. Apparently that's all it can use as Dewdog keeps missing magnitudes. I switch into Couples to get rid of the stat drops, who also takes a smoke screen. Couples uses a water gun that barely does anything, so I switch back to Dewdog while Quilava does what it does best. Magnitude finally hits the next turn, taking Quilava out. After getting flinched by Bite, Dewdog one-shots Zubat with Rock Throw. Red reads us his r/atheism post and storms off. Why do so many people think that he's the best rival? Towards Goldenrod, we pass Route 34, skipping our mark for now as the time of day isn't right. A bit further, we reach Route 35 where we can get our next encounter. I would have liked to catch a Magmar, but that train is blocked off by these campers right here, who all have Pokemon that we don't have. I steal Telgid, the Diglett. In the National Park, we get Ucher, the Raichu, who comes with Thunderbolt this early in the game. And then on Route 36, I catch Abra, who I call Arba. And now for the infamous Whitney battle. Now, I've always been in the camp that finds Whitney a bit overrated, especially during a regular run, but this challenge has given us quite a few disadvantages. All of our encounters are male, meaning they're prone to getting hit with the tract. We can only bring 2 Pokemon, meaning less HP to distribute. I've been using rare candies, so I haven't really gotten that many EVs. And most importantly, something I learned while doing this challenge, most trainer Pokemon have 0 IVs, except for a few trainer classes. Meaning gym leaders Pokemon will always have a higher base stat than us, unless we EV train, which I typically refrain from doing in a vanilla challenge. Joey lied to us. I'll concede that Whitney's looking to be a tough battle this time. For Whitney, I bring Dewdog and I Protect. Whitney sends out Clefairy and I lead with Dewdog. I immediately switch into Eye Protect on Clefairy's Metronome, which lands on Roar of Time, which thankfully misses. A combination of Sleep Powder and Gust takes Clefairy out, leveling Dewdog. Next up is Miltank. I being out was important, as on the switch to Dewdog, Miltank is now locked into Rollout. I use Magnitude, which lands on 5. Then 8. Then Dewdog gets a Magnitude 10, which also crits. I got unbelievably lucky. The plan was just switch into Eye on the last rollout, getting a safe switch into Dewdog, and then continue with the Magnitudes. Honestly a 50-50 chance to wipe, but I hadn't been playing that long, so I was willing to risk it. And this could have been easier had I bought Ucher with Thunderbolt and Arba, who can evolve into an Alakazam. But at the time I wanted to stubbornly prove that I could beat Whitney with 2 common encounters, even with 0 IVs, fully expecting to lose. Unfortunately, I can't really be too smug about being bailed out by crit Magnitude 10, so there's the 3rd badge. I'll take it. On Route 37, I run into a double battle that gives me the option between Clefable and Wigglytuff. I've played Mystery Dungeon, so I don't really want to risk stealing the Wigglytuff, catching the Clefable instead. I call it Blaffolk. In the Burn Tower, we need to once again fight Red. Ghastly goes down to a single Thunderbolt from Ucher, and Quilava's out. I send out Dewdog, and this time Quilava's smokescreen shenanigans don't work out as the first Magnitude hits, but misses the kill. I switch to Copwalls, and he hits his second Water Gun, bringing Quilava down. Magnemite gets destroyed by Magnitude and Zubat gets flattened by Rock Throw. I also forget that I have an encounter and kill my precious Coughing. Next up is Morty, who is also considered somewhat of a run-ender, but unlike Whitney, this one has almost no legs to stand on, as I'll demonstrate with the Tata. A guaranteed encounter in the Sprout Tower, at least in the morning. Ghastly goes down to Crunch. Haunter goes down to Crunch. The only move Gengar can hit normal types with is Sucker Punch, which only has 5 power points. So after stalling all of the Sucker Punch PP using Tail Whip, Gengar goes down to Crunch. Haunter goes down to Crunch. 4th badge. You basically only need 1 normal type with at least 1 status move. A super effective move is helpful, but unneeded as the Ghastly line has weak physical defense. Also, there's a free Shadow Claw TM directly right of Ekritique. I level up some of my Pokemon, and Taboos evolves into a Crobat. On Route 38, we catch our first pure Johtonian Pokemon, Wooper, who I call Rapow. 4 badges in. Aside from the gym leaders, I swear the only Johtonian Pokemon I've seen trainers use so far were Snubbull and Hoppip. Actually, now that I think about it, the only Gen 2 Pokemon among the gym leaders so far was Miltank. And on Route 39 we catch Lurwillup, the Poliwhirl. In Olivine, I once again kill one of my encounters. Towards Cyanwood, I catch Urats, the Staryu, and Lurkitent, the Tentacle. And now we're ready for Chuck. Why does the 5th gym leader only have 2 Pokemon? I mean, it makes it more difficult for me since I can only bring 2 Pokemon, but I would assume most people would have a full team by now. Chuck leads with Primeape and I send out Taboos. Wing Attack does a lot to Primeape, but Primeape goes for a double team. Chuck heals with the Hyper Potion and Taboos manages to hit Wing Attack, nullifying the heal. Taboos even hits his next Wing Attack, Primeape going down. Poliwrath's out, so I stay in for another Wing Attack that does about 40%. Surf hits, bringing Taboos into crit range. I switch into Ucher as he takes a Body Slam, which would have killed if it crit. Instead it paralyzes, meaning Ucher can no longer outspeed. But then Static from Ucher also paralyzes Poliwrath. I don't want Taboos to take more damage, so I stay in and go for a Thunderbolt as Poliwrath preps a Focus Punch. and Uchair hit, bringing Poliwrath down and earning us the 5th badge. This fight could have potentially been a wipe, but the odds were always in our favor. I had North or Cyanwood and get forced into a fight with Usign. Easy enough. Oh. I finally get punished for using speed up. Our first death happens to also be our starter. Now technically the next gym leader is Jasmine chronologically, but Price has a lower level cap, so we fight him first. Before being able to fight Price, we have to put down the sick Gyarados and then are forced to entertain this game's padding. Level 16. You need Surf to get here, meaning you'd have got the 4th badge by now. 4 badges in and you still have to fight level 16 Pokemon. Even one of the admins only has Pokemon around level 22. Anyway, I won't waste your time like the game did mine. We won and lost no Pokemon. Time for Price. For Price, I bring Taboos, Uchair, and Lurkitant. Price's seal goes down to a Thunderbolt. Piloswine comes out, so I switch to Taboos on the ground move. I switch to Lurkitant expecting an ice move, and Piloswine goes for Hail, so I was technically right. I go for Surf, doing a lot of damage, also activating Piloswine's Citrus Berry, and he uses Mud Bomb, lowering Lurkitant's accuracy. I switch to Taboos on the Mud Bomb and then back into Lurkitant on the Blizzard, removing the stat drops. A second Surf takes Piloswine out. I switch back to Uchair on Dugong and a few more Thunderbolts to get us our 6th badge. A pretty straightforward battle. I could have lost a Pokemon to a crit, but I don't think there was much chance of a lose condition. We can immediately move on to Jasmine. For her, I bring Dewdog, Taboos, and Lurkitant. Magnemite gets destroyed by Earthquake. Steelix comes out and I switch to Taboos expecting a ground move, and Steelix uses Sandstorm. I switch into Lurkitant as Steelix goes for a Screech, and I'm worried that a ground move would now KO, so I switch back into Taboos, but Steelix uses Iron Tail, doing over half. I switch back to Lurkitant on the Iron Tail and go for Surf, just missing the kill. But Steelix goes for another Iron Tail? A second Surf knocks Steelix out, and Magnemite gets destroyed by Earthquake. I was kind of worried about this battle, but turns out Steelix has no ground moves at all. Now for probably the worst part in the game. The Rocket Takeover. At the top of the tower we fight Petrol. The first Coughing goes down to a Thunderbolt, but the Wheezing survives. I switch to Dewdog on the Explosion, and the rest of the Coughings feign to Thunderbolt. The only reason I included this fight is because Explosion and Self-Destruct can sometimes trip people up. In the basement, Red gets upset that I've stolen more Pokemon than he has. Golbat gets electrocuted by Thunderbolt. Sneasel goes down to Rock Blast. Haunter gets nibbled on by Crobat, but gets off a curse. Magnemite gets destroyed by Earthquake. Red lives in the society. Quilava doesn't even bother with its smoke screen shenanigans this time, and Earthquake finishes it off. We go through the basement to get a keycard and then back up the tower to reach Archer. Houndour gets taken out by Surf. Houndoom gets taken out by Surf. Coughing gets taken out by Thunderbolt. I expect nothing from this game. I use speed up, but in a regular playthrough, that could take a couple of hours to get through. What an underwhelming section. It's finally nighttime, so I head back to Route 34 to catch Thilwarg the Growlithe. On Route 42 I steal Remoraid, who I call Diorama. Then south of Blackthorn on Route 45 I steal Kocham, the Machoke, and Atinob, the Ponyta. Time for Claire, and this battle's pretty scary. Gyarados and the Dragonairs aren't that big of a deal, but that Kingdra in the back is a run-ender. With powerful stab moves and Hyper Beam to one-shot your Pokemon if it doesn't resist it. I bring Uchair, Lurkitant, Diorama, and Kocham. Gyarados somehow outspeeds Uchair and gets off a bite, but gets paralyzed by static. Uchair flinches. Now Uchair outspeeds to take Gyarados out with one Thunderbolt. I switch out to Diorama on Dragonair, who gets hit with a Thunder Wave. Dragon Pulse does about a third and Aurora Beam does over half. I don't want to switch out Pokemon this early on, so I risk the crit and Dragon Pulse misses the kill. Diorama gets through Paralysis to knock out Dragonair with another Aurora Beam. The second Dragonair's out, so I switch to Lurkitant on the Dragon Pulse. Poison Jab does just under half, but poisons, and Dragonair uses Thunder Wave. Claire heals the next turn, but Lurkitant's Poison Jab crits, nullifying the heal. Dragonair doesn't crit and feigns to another Poison Jab. I need to save switch, so goodbye Lurkitant. That crit was a bit overkill. I switch to Kocham and Kingdra starts off with a smoke screen. Kocham doesn't have no guard but still hits the revenge to do little damage. I'm afraid of the accuracy drop, so goodbye Uchair. Kingdra uses smoke screen again, but Kocham manages to hit revenge once again. This activates the Citrus Berry. Switching out doesn't seem to be helping my accuracy problem, so I decide to stay in. Kingdra hits Hydro Pump, not getting a crit, and Kocham seems to have no guard in spirit as he hits his third revenge, this time boosted, finishing Kingdra off. That very well could have been a wipe, and a single crit could have finished off any of my team members, but I don't have any Pokemon that resists Dragon. A bit problematic for an upcoming battle. So now we're on track for the Pokemon League, but the first thing we need to do is settle on the level cap. Everyone has their own method, but what I personally do for any game that has an Elite Four that don't all have the same levels is that I get the average of all the Elite Four's aces, including the champion, and round that down. In this case, the level cap is 45. This cap is lifted once we beat the first Elite Four member, but I'm not allowed to use rare candies other than the ones I find in the overworld. But before we make our way there, we steal Riano Guard, the Dragonair, from the Dragon Cult. Dragonite is banned in my playthrough, so it's staying as a Dragonair. We also have to fight this bird for some reason. I don't care for catching Pokemon the proper way, so it goes down to a single Rock Blast from Dewdog. Our routes 26 and 27, I steal P-Ram, the Mareep, and Nops, the Espeon. At the end of Victory Road, we get challenged one final time by Red. Sneasel goes down to Flamethrower, Golbat feigns to Rock Blast, Haunter gets eaten up by Taboos but could have killed with a crit Shadow Ball, Kadabra gets knocked out with a Headbutt, Typhlosion comes out but Copwall's Surf is disabled, so I switch into Diorama on the Swift. Typhlosion hits another Swift, putting Diorama into range of another Swift. Surf just misses the kill. I switch back into Copwall, but Lava Plume does a lot. I switch into Thilwarg and it was in range of a Lava Plume crit. Extreme Speed finishes Typhlosion off. And now for the Copperaja in the room. I don't really have any encounters that can reliably take on Lance's Dragonites, especially with a level cap of 45. So I'm going to have to rely on a strategy that I don't really like using but is perfectly valid, and possibly the most consistent way of beating this league. I develop an addiction to Wall Talk Flip so I can get the TMs for Ice Beam and Substitute. Then I break some rocks to find heart scales and some colored shards, particularly the yellow and green ones. The shards let me get some citrus and lumberries, and the heart scales allow me to round off my team's movesets. So with that, our final team is Thilwarg the Arcanine, Diorama the Octillery, Taboos the Crobat, Kocham the Machamp, Dewdog the Golem, and Arba the Alakazam. I also gave them all enough XP just shy of leveling up and made sure Kocham was poisoned. For each battle with the Elite Four, I'll be benching one Pokemon so my team size matches theirs. That Pokemon will still stay in the party, I just won't be allowed to use it. Before Will, I bench Kocham. Will leads with Xatu and I send out Arba. The one thing I'm afraid of is a critical U-turn. I go for a Calm Mind, and luckily as expected Xatu goes for Confuse Ray, but a Lumberry cures Arba from confusion. And now Shadow Ball, Shadow Ball, Shadow Ball, Shadow Ball, and Shadow Ball. And that's Will. For Koga, I once again bench Kocham. This time I leave Diorama and immediately switch into Taboos on Ariados' Spiderweb. A couple of plugs take it out. This levels up both Diorama and Taboos. I switch into Thilwarg and a Flamethrower brings Venomoth down. Koga sends out Fortress for some reason and Flamethrower. Mug comes out so I switch into Dewdog while it minimizes. It outspeeds and uses Minimize again. Dewdog doesn't care and hits Earthquake but misses the kill. Koga heals but Dewdog hits another Earthquake. Muk uses Screech and despite the two minimizes, Dewdog hits his third Earthquake in a row, getting a kill. Crobat's on the field and it can't do anything to Dewdog, so after a few Rock Blasts, we've beaten Koga. I give Dewdog a rest for the fight with Bruno. I leave with Kocham and immediately switch into Arba. Hitmontop goes for an unexpected dig, so I switch into Taboos and back into Arba while Hitmontop goes for a counter. I set up a Calm Mind while Hitmontop goes for another counter. And Psychic, 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 and Psychic. I bench Thilwarg for Karen. Umbreon starts off with a double team but Vital Throw doesn't miss and a boost from Guts brings Umbreon down. Murkrow comes out but feigns to a Rock Blast from Dewdog. Varplume's next, so I switch into Arba as it goes for Petal Dance to do just under half. A Psychic takes it out. Now it's Gengar and the only super effective move it has is Lick. On an Elite Four team. I'm going to be honest, I didn't realize I was in crit range. Citrus Berry activates and a single Psychic brings Gengar down. Finally it's Houndoom and it's actually terrifying. It has Nasty Plot and moves that can two-shot all of my team, so no playing around crits. Now the main reason why I had Arba out was so I could bait a dark move, but on the switch to Kocham, Houndoom uses Flamethrower. It doesn't crit, but there's no way Kocham's surviving another hit, so sorry Kocham. I get a safe switch into Dewdog thanks to Kocham's sacrifice. Houndoom uses Dark Pulse, just leaving Dewdog on 9 HP. Dewdog pushes past the flinch and Earthquake finishes Houndoom in one hit. That fight was probably the one I was dreading the most. I still had Diorama in the back, but losing both Kocham and Dewdog right before the champion would have forced me to rely on only one plan. But now we're ready for the final battle. Before heading into his room, I teach Substitute to Arba. Lance leads with Gyarados and I lead with Thilwarg. We trade Intimidates and I switch into Taboos on the Waterfall. This baits Ice Fang, allowing me to switch back into Thilwarg, getting off a safe Intimidate. I think you can see where this is going. I do this 4 more times and thanks to a Citrus Berry and Gyarados not critting, Taboos manages to stay alive. but now I need to save switch. Rest well, Taboos. Oh, Taboos gets off a confused ray, but sorry Taboos, I really need you to faint. Taboos' sacrifice allows Arbor to come in safely. I set up a substitute, but Gyarados snaps out of confusion and hits Dragon Pulse, which immediately breaks it. I realize this isn't going to work yet, so I set up 2 Calm Minds while hoping Gyarados doesn't crit. Luckily he doesn't, so I set up substitute and recover some HP. Unfortunately, the next 3 waterfalls in a row break my substitutes and we're starting to run low on PP. I need to substitute up when Gyarados goes down, so I decide to risk the crit and set up the last couple of Calm Minds. After setting up my last Calm Mind, I set up a substitute, recover some HP, set up another substitute, and Gyarados misses an Ice Fang. Perfect. And Gyarados goes down to Psychic, and Aerodactyl comes out. This is why I needed the substitute up. Aerodactyl outspeeds and Aerial Ace breaks the substitute, but Psychic one-shots. Charizard goes down to Psychic. The Ace Dragonite goes down to Psychic. The second Dragonite goes down to Psychic. And a +6 Psychic puts an end to the final Dragonite and the Nuzlocke. I may have done this on my first attempt, but there are many battles that I wasn't expecting to be so difficult or as close as they were. I think some of them might have had to do with my team having 0 IVs and detrimental natures. Honestly, should just rename this to the 0 IV challenge, as in terms of Pokemon, this really just felt like a regular Hardcore Nuzlocke towards the end. In all honesty, Heart Gold and Soul Silver are among my least favourite games in the franchise, and I don't really Nuzlocke them as often, so this was a fun way to revisit these regions. Thanks for watching. I don't really see myself doing the Kanto portion as I find that part a bit boring just to get to 2 interesting battles. I might return to it in the future to do a new game plus type challenge where I use a whole new team or something, but for now I think I'd like to move on to a new challenge. So please look out for that in the future.